Good evening. I'm now calling to order the Monday, July 3rd, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. Ms. G, can you call the roll?
Mr. Jean?
Present.
Ms. Hockenberry?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. Teets?
Here.
Mr. Wodiska?
Here.
Mr. Krasner and Mr. Rankin are absent.
Okay. Next item is the receipt, the adoption of agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the agenda as proposed.
Can I get a second?
A second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All right, great. Agenda's adopted. Ms. G, have we received any petitions?
I have none.
Okay, that makes sense on July 3rd. Old business, none. New business, none. Other business. We are getting a briefing on the addition to the city's official register and historic sites.
I would just like to inform you that we have identified a property that was not previously identified when the city prepared a historic register of protected sites. The property is 124 North Fairfax Street, and that will be coming before you next week, your next meeting, and we just wanted to give you a heads up that this is coming up. We have notified adjacent property owner, and none of the owners have objected to the designation, and so it will just take a planning commission action to add this site to the register.
Is this the first house that's come before us in a long
Yeah,
time?
I haven't.
So
I
what's
haven't
the planning
experienced it.
commission role on the historic? We just approve that, yes, it meets the criteria, or?
That's correct. Just that it was a late identified property, and that we'll have a staff report and better attachments, but
Okay.
just wanted to give you a heads up that this is coming.
All right, looking forward to it. All right, item number 9, approval of minutes. Does anybody have any corrections on these
Oh,
minutes?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, I do.
All right.
Online, on line 109 and 110 and 111, I expressed my opinion that we really need to have a foundation for the police secure garage good enough or strong enough to hold a second story in the future for offices or for parking. And and as far as the lines 110, 111, I do not like value engineering. And again, this is what's happening to us all the time. So we end up with not exactly the projects we want. And I will stick with the crappy materials that have been put in the schools over the years with renovations. I know that's a terrible word and unsophisticated, but I said it.
Wait, you want to insert the word crappy?
No, it's there.
Okay.
It's there.
All right.
I would like to take it out, but,
Oh, that makes more sense.
yeah, okay.
Got it.
But I did say it. The renovations up at the high school have just been horrendous. But I do object to us always value engineering
Well,
everything we ever do.
these are not verbatim records, so if you'd like to change the word.
No, that's fine.
You're okay with it?
I'm fine.
All right. Fair
I
enough.
just wanted to make sure that I did not appear that I really approved value engineering.
Got it.
That I got a good laugh out of.
Anyone else? Right, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as, the minutes as amended?
I so move. Oh,
Okay, you can move and I'll second.
Okay, got it.
You move with your agenda, your amendments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, we are moving right along. Are there any planning commission reports?
I have one. I've arranged with Kate Reich, the city arborist, to give us a brief walking tour of Maple Avenue next to the 116 Maple site application, where the sidewalk is being proposed for the purpose of just observing which trees are proposed to be removed in order to install the sidewalk. So this is going to be at 6:30. Was the tree commission, but any of our members are welcome to join in. It's at the corner of Great Falls and Maple at 6:30. And that's Wednesday, July 5th.
Coming right up. Anyone else?
And just quickly, VPIS will be having a reading of the Declaration of Independence tomorrow here in this chambers at noon. So I just want to remind people, if you'd like to hear a reading of the, and also they'll read parts of the Constitution as well.
Okay. I'll just quickly report on the Economic Working Group that meeting we had on Friday. Once again, we heard from Alvarez and Marcel. They had tightened up their numbers a bit in terms of what we heard a couple of weeks ago, and the numbers basically remained the same in terms of the value of the land. They were just based on some different assumptions, and some variables went up, some went down, but ultimately we ended up at roughly the same place. I think what I took away from it is we really just need to, in terms of the way we put this out, is to reduce the risk to a developer in any way that we can as a city. There's many different levers. We're trying to, when we put out the RFP, they're recommending it both an RFQ/RFP process, and that the hope is that we reduce the risk in any areas that we can. And my personal takeaway was that the fact that this land is not zoned is going to become a problem sooner than later. And I'm going to talk to the staff. We got a busy agenda coming up over the next couple of weeks, but I really want to push for us to revisit the zoning of this area. It's time now. We have been talking about it for a long time. Jim Snyder's been talking about it for a long time, and we've danced around it, wanted to get more information. But as a planning commission, I think it's time to push to zone this. Their recommendation was B2. I personally like to see B2 with some sort of overlay on top of it. That was a discussion that happened. It's not just my own thoughts. Because I'd like to see us have an opportunity to allow for increased density on that site. B2 allows for the school and allows for up to 115 feet, but I think if a developer is willing to propose something different, I'd like to give them that flexibility, but that's a conversation for another evening. I just want to push on that and begin to have us think about how we want to zone it. But the preliminary recommendation that we heard at the meeting on Friday was a B2 zoning. I did just want to welcome my daughter to this meeting. School is out, and she's always asking to come to Daddy's meetings, so I wanted to formally recognize that she's now been allowed to come.
Now she believes me that I'm on this with you.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Do you have a planning director's report?
No, not at this time.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to adjourn, and we're going to go into a work session to discuss the City Hall site plan and also the capital improvements plan. Are we going to do the CIP first? You look like you're ready to go.
Yes, Chair, I would
Okay.
prefer that.
All right. So we're adjourned. Welcome back. All right. You're going to walk us through a full CIP, or we're just going to talk about the additional school piece to it?
What I would like to do, Chair Woodiska and Commissioners, is to give you a highlight of the staff report and the ordinance that's before you, but focus mostly on the presentation that deals with the financial affordability and the options between a full CIP and a modified. So that gives you context for the motions that I've drafted for you. And then at the end of this evening, seek your direction for how you would like the ordinance brought forward on July 17th. I do want to acknowledge that I have with us the the chair of the school board, Lawrence Webb, who will be available to answer any questions related to the school projects that you might have, as well as Lisa Hyde from the school. Superintendent Noonan sends his regrets, but he was already out of town when this meeting was confirmed to be available. We also do have Mike Whitfield, Director of Public Works, here. Definitely will be here for the second work session item, but he is also here because you'll notice on the CIP amendment, there is one transportation amendment. And so I just want to highlight that first because it's minor and it's grant funded, but it's critical for moving some projects forward. So that item on the staff report is line 70, and it is moving unspent money from 2 projects, which was a good thing because they got done and under budget, and moving it over to a project so that we can implement and continue working on the South Washington undergrounding of the utilities, which has been a long-awaited project. We have awarded the contract, so we're ready to proceed. This is commercial and industrial equivalent funds, and so it's what matches our MVTA 30% and cannot be reallocated to other non-transportation related funds. The CIP that's before you is the full CIP. That's what council referred out to boards and commissions, specifically the Planning Commission. The full CIP I'll go through in a little bit more details, but it basically is everything you adopted before on the same timeline, and then adding George Mason Middle School, Community School campus dollar amounts, the transportation, and then from a financial analysis perspective, adds in TJ Elementary School 15 million, which is slightly outside of the 5-year CIP, but we've modeled it financially. That's sort of what's known as the full CIP. So that's what's before you as a starting point. By charter and code, we can go down from the dollar amount, but we cannot go up, and so this is presented at the high level. This is coming back to you as requested by the Planning Commission when you took action on your CIP on February 22nd. As you will recall, one of your motions, clauses in your motion specifically requested that this be formally referred back once the dollar amount. So that's what we are doing this evening. The ordinance is scheduled for second reading on July 24th, so this work session would be to prep for the July 17th requested Planning Commission action. In the motions, you'll see that we've drafted approving a modified CIP, which is the staff's recommendation, which I'll go through in some detail for you, the full CIP, which is presented tonight in your packet, modified based on Planning Commission input and direction, deferral, which would delay the second reading, and then a denial. The July 24th second reading is scheduled in order to keep with the current plan and schedule for a November bond referendum for the high school. If we don't meet the July 24th second reading, we can't get through all the court filing process in order to have this on the ballot. So I say that because so that you know the magnitude and the impact if the Planning Commission elects a deferral or denial of a recommendation back to council. The modified CIP, as a highlight, is only submitted to you not because the projects aren't valuable, but because of financial sustainability. The timing of the modified from the city manager's perspective allows us to time issuing the debt, spread it out a little more, and most specifically allows the joint campus and the economic development land value to come into play. As you were speaking to Chair Wadiska, you know, that $43 million is a significant lever to affording the high school project. So with that, if I may, I will go into the presentation. Several of you may have seen this if you were at the council meeting or viewing it, but we thought it was important to make sure for the record and for make sure all Planning Commission members receive this information. Some of it I will go through at a quicker level and be available questions because the Planning Commission sees this material a lot as we go through the CIP. This is the current city debt That's 51.2 million. And I will note for the audience, the one projector is not working this evening, so we are only on one screen. Being recorded fully, however. 51 million is what's on the city books today. As we all know, the majority of that has been for school facilities. In the full CIP, we will be adding another $167.5 million. So 210 million, a significant increase in total for the debt on the city books. So it's a very important and significant decision to be having. The library is 8.7. City Hall is listed here as 11.7. That is just the amount left to issue for debt. We've already issued about 5 million. So the total of the project still is 16.95, but this just reflects the amount of debt issuance. And other includes voting equipment, firing range, and a variety of other projects, land
Larry
acquisition,
Graves
the
is in
turf,
that.
et cetera. So if you did the adopted CIP that you adopted in February and council did in April, you would be adding 33 million to the 51 existing debt. When you add George Mason High School, 120 million, that's the school board's preferred community school of 117 million plus 3 million for fees for issuing the debt for 120. TJ 15.3, that gets you to the 167.5. Now, while TJ is not in this 5-year window, you'll see it's proposed for 2025. We felt it was important to model what's known out there in the near future. So this graph on the right just kind of gives you a visual sense of where our debt is now and where it would be if the full CIP was implemented. This is another visual look to it, similar to what you've seen before. This is the 12% policy limit of debt to expenditure ratio. The red is the George Mason High School. This is TJ modeled. We have modeled in the out years, this light blue, and it's called out years. This is assuming that we'll need additional reinvestment. You can't just stop once we do TJ and the full CIP, which is the challenge that we've been facing now. So this is 5 million every other year, and so that reflects the debt service building up. In the out years, you can see we're within the policy limits, but here we are 7 years over policy. This is existing debt, and then school, TJ, and library in Mount Daniel are. We have 2 different analyses now that Karen Bawa, our new CFO, has done. So this is a slightly different version than you all have seen before, but I think it's helpful to think about. These triangles reflect using the capital reserve, but not land sales. So this is just reflecting the 10 million that's in capital reserves as a result of the water sale that was set aside for capital reinvestment, specifically in the community talked about for the high school. So when you do that, your out-of-policy compliance is lessened, and here you're back in compliance for practical purposes.
And that's the full 10 million?
Full 10 million. What we always maintain in this model is 3 million is left in capital reserve, because that's the policy limit to allow you a little bit of emergency flex on a project. So some of this is related to tax increases using the money, but it's targeting the 10 million. There's still 3 million always left in the pot. Now, if it doesn't show up as great in here, but this here, triangles, is that 10 million plus assuming $40 million of land sale. So basically this is 50 million to offset your debt service payments. And so this brings you back within policy limits. Now, as we all have always talked about, policy limits doesn't necessarily translate to affordability to the taxpayer. So that's the challenge. But this would be very important in terms of the bond issuance and the bond rating we get and the interest rates. So
Cindy-
here, you're not out of policy compliance at all with the full CIP.
Cindy, when does MEH come off?
2025. So that and the land sale coming in projected at 2022 is your point. And you can see here where we're dropping with Mary Ellen Henderson, right there. And then you get a little bit here with the fire station and the community center, but the big drop is when Mary Ellen Henderson's.
Okay, but that's down there.
Right.
The deeper red is the high school.
Yeah, this is all high school, but you can see how you drop here, and the corresponding is, the
Okay.
existing has Mary Ellen Henderson in it.
Thank you.
Can you explain these triangles here? I mean, it's dipped below, it looks, I know you just said it makes it in policy, but it does not appear that way on this chart. I know it's hard to see those triangles, but
Yeah, it's
it looks,
sort of
it looks
like
worse,
a-
not better. What
This is a virtual policy compliance, because technically you've issued the debt, and technically you're over your 12%, but if you use your $50 million reserve to pay your debt service, you have this level of impact on the general fund. It means you don't have to raise the taxes to pay for it. So we have actually asked the bond rating and our financial analysts, how would the bond ratings look at this? And they would see that as favorable. Even though you are technically over your policy, you are using your resources to not overburden the general fund and the tax.
So those triangles are what would otherwise be the top of the bars,
Yes,
not a revised purple line.
right. So the
Got it.
purple line
Okay,
stays
I'm with
the
you
same.
now.
Does that
Below
make
the line
sense?
is good.
Yeah, right.
Yes. So here we are right at policy, and then we are clearly below policy. Now you can see with our current debt, we are nowhere near policy. So we are taking on a big infrastructure investment, which we've known has been needed. That's the full CIP. These are some of the assumptions. You have hard copies in your presentation, but for the City Hall, other library, and TJ, we're sticking to the current financial policies, 20-year level principal, and you can see the years. For the high school, as we've been talking about, using special financing, that's a 30-year level debt. And so that costs more in the long run, but makes it affordable as you phase out. So we wanted to make sure the assumptions were on the record.
Was there ever any discussion of using the level debt and some of the other levers on the City Hall, other CIP in the library, as opposed to just the high school?
The Council Budget Finance Committee and Council as a whole prefers to stay as close to the financial policies for the regular stuff that's sort of your normal facility reinvestment, willing to take a little bit more risk on the once-in-a-generation $120 million project. That also seemed to be more favorably received by the bond rating agencies. That the exception was where you went out of policy. Also, the interest rates are 3.5 to 5. With delaying projects, we have increased the interest rate because that is potential. We're also, you can see the phasing for George Mason. This aligns with the current study for the community school, how you would build that out in phasing. And so we'd issue the debt in 3 tranches to not have too much issued out until we need it. This is another way of looking at that impact, translating it into pennies or the taxpayer's bill. So with the land sale, you can see it's much lower. Now, this is still the full CIP, so it's $120 million for George Mason, $15 million for TJ, nothing deferred or delayed. And you would need 9 cents. Then it can drop down when those other debts come off, and then you stay steady at 5 cents because you're still planning to do some reinvestment. Without the land sale, you immediately need to get to 13 cents, and then it's still going to jump up. Issued that second tranche of George Mason High School, and then it could drop back down, but that's in 2030. So that's a visualization of the impact of land sale and economic development. This is using the 10 million reserve either way. Land sale is the variable. This is also already building in the 1.5 cent capital reserve that council increased with the FY18 budget, started on Saturday, and also the pension investment, which is translating into 1.5 cents.
The 5 cent, based on the years, it looks like the 5 cent, that includes some assumptions about economic development? Or that's just, we're only land sale here?
Only land sale. So no real estate, sales, meals, and all have been projected into this model, predominantly because, one, that would be a real rough estimate because we don't know what kind of mix is coming with that economic development. Also, we are assuming that you're going to need some of that increased value for your operational costs. You build larger schools, you have higher enrollment, you're going to need teachers and operating. You're going to need more police, library, recs and park. And so this is simply to see, can we afford it based on the land sale? A lot of other projections and assumptions would go into the use of other spin-off economic development value. Now, there are a lot of reasons for considering a modified CIP, and because of these, that is why what the city manager is recommending to you this evening is the modified CIP, not the full CIP. Market timing is a risk. We don't know when that land sale will actually happen. We have an estimate based on the consultants. Interest rates can go up, construction costs can go up and down. It's a lot of risk to take on all at once. We could get a credit downgrade with taking on that much debt. We want to control the risk for project costs. Now, you'll see in a minute some of the modified CIP is modeling increased costs because of the delay, because you can't do the same with the same dollar amount, because that's what we're seeing with City Hall and Mount Daniel issues. There will be other financing needs in the community, and we need to deal with the operating risks, because increased facilities, while they may hopefully reduce maintenance, there are other operating personnel costs. So for the modified CIP, the George Mason Community School stays the same, and that is because in order to get that $40 million to impact, we need the high school so that we free up the 10 acres for redevelopment. City Hall stays on schedule due to the public safety needs and where it is in the project. Other CIPs, I have a list there, I'll show you in a minute, is reduced to $6.5 million. The library is delayed to 2022. One of the earlier work session discussions with council had the library at 2025. Council requested that instead of a drop in tax rates earlier in the model that you'll see in a moment, that we stick at the 4 cents, and that allowed for the library to come up to 2022. So it's still in this 5-year CIP window, but it is not FY19 for debt issuance.
And
The
Cindy,
design was to start this
yeah,
year.
that fits in with the referendum on the library?
Yes, under state code, you have 8 years after a referendum to issue the bonds, and from issuance of bonds, you have 3 years to complete the construction. So this would still be within that 8-year window. And then we've modeled TJ at 2025 for $15.3 million. The preliminary estimates that the superintendent and the school board had looked at had been ranging between 10 and 15, so we modeled at the higher end since this is an out year. 2025 is, from my understanding from the superintendent and school board discussions, a challenging timeline because it's pushing the enrollment projections for TJ and Mount Daniel. So the challenge is do the high school because the facility needs are great and you need the land sale, but delaying TJ is good for affordability, but it could create some programmatic and class size challenges. I was going to say opportunities, but that sounds positive. For the other CIPs, what is still funded is the firearm range, the Mount Daniel, which was the additional $1 million that was already awarded to cover project escalation costs. Transportation, that's the CIE local match to bring down all our federal and state money. Park master plan, voting equipment, fire station, roadbed reconstruction. Equipment refers to vehicles predominantly. What would be delayed, not removed, but delayed, would be Larry Graves' turf and land acquisition.
How long would it be delayed, the turf specifically?
Basically to here at 2027, when we bring in the first other. So these others could pick up the Larry Graves. It could pick up land acquisition if that was still desired. The specific one that had been talked about for that 4 million doesn't seem to be a good solution for school design.
But I was thinking as far as Larry Graves, when we're working up there at GM, we're going to need practice fields. And, you know, if we improve Larry Graves within this CIP, I don't know if there was any discussion of this by city council, but the fact is that we're going to then have to rent space from other, I would think, other schools in order to compensate for the lack of space as far as playing fields up at the high school when we're doing our building.
That certainly is a consideration. Rex and Park Advisory Board did acknowledge that this could be a resource during that construction time. It won't eliminate the need for Rex and Park to do maintenance on that field because it's in deplorable condition, but the fix of a basic grass would be less. The challenge will be the timing and the phasing of the high school, which right now the community school retains the fields where they are, but they're going to be in construction site.
Right,
and not
right, and
always-
some of them may be used even for geothermal drilling and things
Yeah,
like
so
that.
that's a little over
There are
a
likely to be a lot of difficulty with any of our fields up there. I don't think any of them are quite safe as far as, you know, location, yeah, but during construction.
So the challenge is, as I said at the beginning, this is not done because the projects aren't warranted or needed, is from a financial sustainability and timing. In this scenario, there's less years over policy, and the amount over policy is less. And you could fund, basically, this is modeling the library paid with cash and not debt issuance. So, but you see it's, instead of 8.3, it's now 10.7. There's a 5% modeling in here for escalation costs. Still over policy, but more closer. If you add land sales, then here's your policy, the virtual policy line, the real impact to the general fund, even though you'll be hitting more debt issuance, you'll be significantly below policy again. That is with the cash going towards library. So this is what it looks like in the dollar amount on the tax bill or the cent translation. So now instead of 9, you're at 4. Instead of 13, you're at 7. You still have a pretty big steep increase without the land sales. This labels out here, you can see it stays at 4 cents longer. That was to bring the library into the current CIP at 2022. If you delayed this library out till 2025, then you could drop down to 2, but then you're going to have to go back. So council thought that from a policy and a consistency expectation of taxpayers, just don't go up and down, stay flat, and get a program in that the community voted for. We also had a request during the council work session for what if instead of using the 50 million to pay debt service, you actually used it to pay down the principal, so you financed less. What would that look like? And it actually, in the front end, will save you a little bit, but it still has a big increase because you're still financing more longer, and so when you do the financial modeling, it's actually more cost-effective to do the land sale. It's a little better if you do principal. Without the land sale, it's still going to be a high number. Same assumptions are in there. So this is just to see a different model, but you're still at 9 cents. So it doesn't significantly reduce the tax burden. Then it has a really big drop later on because so the more impact is later on because you have less principal over the 30 years, but up front it doesn't help the current taxpayer generation. These are the affordability matrix that we've gone through on every CIP, looking at our policy cap. And so just to make sure you're aware of some of the impacts of this, the yellow is the full CIP, the green is the modified. Policy, we should not exceed 5%. So in the modified, go to 4%. Full gets a little close. Manassas Park is way above the regional average because they did a whole lot of debt and then had a whole lot of financial challenges to afford those new schools and facilities. Debt service to expenditures, you all are familiar with the 12% policy. You can see the average is at 10. In either case, we go over policy, but once again, with the virtual triangles and the use of the land sale and the reserves, you would be below that policy in terms of the impacts on the general fund and the taxpayers. That plan would be well received by bond rating agencies, even if we went over policy. Debt per capita, this is a new ask from council. What would that look like? So you can see that with either of the CIPs, we're much higher than the Northern Virginia median and the majority of our peers. Now, for some of these, to get total comparison, you would need to combine Fairfax and Vienna, for example, because Vienna's paying the Fairfax County per capita. So it's not quite as stark as it looks if you combine Herndon and Vienna into Fairfax, for example. Another ask was total debt to household income. When you looked at the household income, then you've got a lot more over the 10%. Either way, we're still pretty high.
Those are some amazing, that's really interesting up there.
These two were two different new charts that council requested of our CFO.
And Cindy, remember when we went and visited City of Fairfax and looking at everything that they were doing out there, and they were issuing a lot of debt in order to do things within the city and get it done all at once. So that was, but
Yeah, and they're still high, but they would have
Yeah.
been higher. What helped them was the economic development in their downtown,
right.
even though it's struggling a little bit after the economy. And of course, they have a different relationship with the county for the library and the schools as well. So in terms of sort of the next steps on the joint campus effort, the market evaluation study is underway, and as the chair noted, they just had an update to the economic working group, and that report's due on the 17th. We will be asking your recommendation on this ordinance on the 17th. Bond reference ordinance will also be adopted by council on that date. CIP ordinance we're talking about this evening. And then we'll continue to work with our financial advisors September and October, and then November is the current proposed referendum. So that was the financial piece we wanted to provide you for tonight. I did provide an overview of the ordinance. Also in your packet, you have a memorandum from the superintendent on the history of the George Mason High School project going all the way back to 1949 and the original $700,000 to buy the land to current. And then we also provided an update on the City Hall space program and crosswalk because that was part of council's CIP discussion, so I wanted to have that in its entire package. The City Hall piece, though, I intend to talk about when we do the site plan discussion. So with that, be glad to entertain questions and direction. And as I noted, we have additional people available to answer Planning Commission questions.
All right, thank you. Ms. Mester, any questions?
I have a comment. I was looking at all of this, that I find it really uncomfortable looking at all of this expenditure and where it's going to put us. I also, hesitate to believe that 15 million is going to hold us in such a way that we're not going to be downgraded at some point. It just feels as if we're gambling, in a sense, with this new high school and all this debt that we're taking on. And It's just my feeling, just looking at it, the future looks very uncomfortable. But anyway, I have a question. That was just a comment. Question that I have is the 120 million for the schools. Does that have a 5% built-in for escalation?
That does have escalation costs built in by the consultants for the timing of the construction. I don't recall the exact percentage, but it is built on their delivery schedule and construction schedule. And once again, it's 117 million, deducting the 6.5 that were out there as options for classroom sizes.
And so what happens if we go over that 120 million that's projected to this really nice model that you have, which makes me uncomfortable? What happens then?
Well, in the modified version, if you were over 120, which comes in on third year of tranche, it just worsens your over policy compliance and impact on the taxpayers to meet the end. Now, the 120 is full cost in, hard, soft financing without a deduct for the land sales. So that's where this triangle really is important, and to minimize that risk and that uncomfortable feeling is why the city manager is proposing modifying, and because the 2022 is about when the land sale is projected to come in based on economic development, zoning, approvals, SC, site plan, and then construction. But they would bring in initial land sale value when they close the deal.
And if the land sale doesn't happen, what happens then?
The debt service is like your mortgage. It's the first thing that has to be paid, so it's going to be the legal obligation of the city to pay it before any of our other bills.
Does that increase our tax burden at that time if the land sale doesn't, for some reason, doesn't
Yeah,
happen?
so that's what this blue line is. If you either the land sale didn't happen or the community decided they didn't want the economic development and the sale of the land, you'd be looking with the modified CIP, 11 cents at 2025. This is modeling TJ, which we purposely did so that people wouldn't see 11 cents and then get surprised at 15. But at the full CIP, that was 13.
Okay, and my final question is, at the highest level of taxes that we're going to be getting, if, let's say, in the worst case possible, where does that put us with regard to Fairfax and Arlington in terms of our tax burden?
Right now, at the current tax rate, we're about the middle of those little cities, and the counties outside of Arlington and Fairfax. You do that, then we'll just be, at the top of the list.
At the top of the
Not
list?
necessarily the good top of the
Yeah,
list.
and then you have citizens fleeing
You sort
the
of can
city.
compare it here with the debt per capita, because they're paying their taxes
Yeah,
with that.
exactly. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have
Yep.
a question. For the bond referendum for November, it's my understanding that the voters will just see the high school amount, the debt amount that's needed for the high school, in other words, the 120 million, as far as the language of the actual referendum goes. Will that be accompanied by a lot of the analysis that we saw here this evening, however, not in the bond referendum language, but as just part of the city's outreach, including the impact on the tax rate?
Yes, from a factual standpoint, because we can't speak for or against the voter referendum, there'll be fact sheets that accompany, and all of this material, of course, is available on the website, but we'll try to distill it into the facts for and against.
I think it's for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I'm inclined to suggest that we, on the 17th, I think that's when we're supposed to provide our input, that we support the modified CIP, and that really gets down to the tax rate impact of 4 cents versus 9 cents. 9 cents instinctively, I feel, is just going to be too much for our voters to accept. 4 cents is pushing it, but maybe that stands a pretty good chance. So as I think about it right now, that's kind of where I come out.
couple of comments here. So nothing is included. You've got the 15.3 in the future for TJ. Anything in the future for expansion of MEH, or was that coming in with the connection with the high school?
The MEH is joint with the community school for connecting the common
Okay.
areas and
Okay.
so forth.
I know that's why we were talking about that, but that has got to be emphasized within that. Also, I want to point out a couple things. Since we've got school people here, on Dr. Noonan's history of GMHS campus, I wish that also within all that, it would include all the renovations we've done there with the amount of money that was put in them, the years when they were done, and the additions and everything, because I think that is part of the history. You just can't jump from 1949 to 1994 and then say something about the Virginia Tech lease. It makes no sense to it. And there were so many renovations, and I think that is very necessary for the basic information of everything. And then also along that line, I think we need to look at lessons learned big time. And this was something I alluded to the last time we spoke, that the delays in Mount Daniel cost us a lot of money and cost us a smaller school. So that was a big loss on both parts, both tax money and the size of school that we really needed, and that delay really, really hurt. Also, lessons learned in TJ. I know that this body recommended very, very strongly that we go ahead and do a referendum in addition to the other funding for TJ and get it done. At this point in time, it's going to cost more money. And again, that is delays that have cost us more money, such as we're sitting with the City Hall project that has gone on for years, and the impact is giving us less for more money. So those are concerns that I really want us to be aware of, and to make sure that we're both very open about some of those things, because I think, we've lost out a lot with not acting as quickly and precisely as we should have for the future needs of our city and the future needs for our government and school needs. And we've done it repeatedly with not only time delays, but value engineering. And that is something you'll probably hear me say a lot about, because it's something that's near and dear to my heart. The last renovation up at the high school was just a total horrible project. And I think I've been through 3 renovations up there at least, but also TJ and everything like that. But I think that we've got to be very aware of our history and how we've handled things along the way. And we need to look at not doing those things.
Anyone else? All right, well,
To me, one other thing. Have copies of this?
Certainly.
That's from the City Council presentation last Monday.
I think it's what you just showed
And that's
us.
the copy of
I think
everything
it's
you've
this
shown
one.
there?
Yeah.
Okay,
This is
thank
the
you.
same one, yeah.
Okay.
And Deborah G. has an electronic version of this. The only thing different was we corrected one legend that was reversed. So this is actually accurate.
Yeah, go for
She
it.
want to go?
Nope.
Okay. No, I just want to say, I'm comfortable with the modified CIP. I think that the hardest thing here is delaying the library project, especially because we had a referendum, it passed very well, and there's a lot of needs at the library. But, I feel like, I was trying to think, I think it was 9 or 10 years ago, I was on a 2-year task force that planned the new high school. Cindy and I, 2 years of meetings. And I think at that point, the high school was like 65 million because we were coming out of 08, 09 when construction was cheap. And I just feel like, and there was an attempt before that and another, and all it's going to do is keep increasing in cost. And so at some point, we just have to move forward. And while I don't like delaying the library and I don't like delaying Larry Graves' I just think we have to make choices. So, you know, this seems like there's a lot of other things in the CIP I think are just more important at this point.
The cost of the delays of the big things are really costing us, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's
I
like every
agree.
time we delay this, I really wish we had moved forward 9 years ago. I think we had good plans then, and it would have been cheaper, but we didn't. So now we have to live
Right.
with the world we're in.
We also didn't have the land.
Well, you know, we knew this day was coming. We have been talking about this new high school, as you said, for, you know, quite a while, for much longer. I've been on the commission here for 9 years, and it's been on the CIP every single year. But when it came, it was going to require some tough decisions. It's very unfortunate that the library is going to be under the modified CIP, the project that takes the brunt of this in terms of things that we have to or that we're unable to fund. But we do have to make difficult decisions. I think the time has come. We've done a lot of research, a lot of discussion, and the high school needs to get replaced. I think that's certainly, it appears to be clear to this body and more the neighborhood as the discussion continues. So I think the modified CIP makes sense. But like Mr. DeJean, I'm very uncomfortable with the numbers in the short term. And having been the benefit of being on this economic working group, we've sort of discussed and worked through some of the short-term risks here, and that's really where I see it. It's really in the short term. There is going to be this period between when we build the high school and when the economic development comes on board. This doesn't model that in these tax rates, but I've said from the very beginning, you know, I wouldn't support any school project that didn't allocate the full 10 acres for economic development. These numbers make that as obvious as it could be that we need every single opportunity. That's why I said at the meeting earlier that I want to look at increased density on that location for the economic development. But there's going to be this risk period that, and I don't think really that the land sale is that much at risk. This is a desirable property, and for all the reasons we've discussed many times before, I think that the risk really is in the economic development. What we can do to make sure that we, as a city, do what we have to do to ensure that the best project comes in. These tax rates sort of indicate that maybe, you know, some of the community's wishes that there's parks there or big community benefit kind of projects may be difficult to afford. So I think that's something that we need to think about as these proposals come forward, is that, you know, this is a very big ask of our community, and there is some real short-term risk. But I do think in the long term, this is this land is located in a spot that developers will want to come here and won't pass up the opportunity to be, you know, inside the Beltway, by a metro, 10 acres, that kind of thing. So I'm inclined to support the modified CIP, but it does make me concerned about how these tax rates are going up and what's going to happen in the next couple of years. So those are my comments on that. That comes before us next meeting, right? For us to take formal action. Okay.
Just one other thought. The land sale, this doesn't include the tax yield from that, right? This is just the sale part.
That is correct.
So there are some upside opportunities in the analysis. I recognize there's a lot of moving parts, so you can't get it all in there. One other question I had is, I think it was City Council member Letty Hardy recommended that we go to a 10-year CIP, and I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts
Read
about that?
too.
Yeah, she did mention that at the last time, and I haven't had a chance to vet it internally with staff. I think there's a lot of value in that. Some of our transportation's already in a 6-year window, and a lot of the master plans and stuff could easily be put out to a 10-year. So it's just a question of formatting 10 years, 5 years at 1 year, and then some chunks, but we can explore that. Since the Planning Commission gets to be the prime lead on the advising and recommendation, I'd be welcome to input as to how you might like to see your next CIP.
How thick would this get with a tenure?
It probably wouldn't get that much thicker because a lot of the projects just have multiple years. I'm trying to decide if I could keep it to a letter-sized spreadsheet and put 10 years in there. I may have to go to longer, but probably not much thicker.
Mr. Chair, could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When we're talking about land sale, has that been totally, are we still considering land lease or land sale?
Oh, I actually think the discussion on Friday sounded like more of a ground lease to me.
Right,
But
so I wasn't there on Friday, so
Yeah,
I didn't know which we were going to do, but I think we need to be careful with our language on that.
yeah, I mean, it has not been decided. We're
Right.
trying to figure out options, but
Yep.
I do, at the last meeting, it was proposed to be a ground lease. And
Okay.
at some point, there was some discussion that maybe we'd hold out some small portion to sell that, but that was quickly dismissed at the meeting. But one of the things we're trying to figure out as it relates to these charts here is if we ask for some, I don't want to say significant, some portion of the money up front upon reaching an agreement prior to the completion of the high school, but we would hold the money for a couple of years. That comes with pluses and minuses. One, it helps us with the tax rate. You get some money right up front, but it overall decreases the value significantly. Someone's going to do it, net present value and say that I'm only willing to give you, some small percentage. There's some hope that it could be a significant amount of dollars, somewhere in the realm of $10 million. But these are just numbers that are thrown out.
Yeah, interestingly, Alvarez and Marsalis didn't think there would really be that much difference between a ground lease and a sale, which is why they were encouraging us to go with the ground lease
Well,
option.
right, that's why I just wanted to make sure we keep those options in, because people, I think citizens might get a little uptight, not only because of the money, but with the word sale at this point in time. So I was just
Yeah, look,
putting that out.
this is a long way to go before it gets approved by voters. I mean, we go into November, and I think that's a sort of challenge to the entire city and to the boards and commissions who are supportive of this. You see these numbers in isolation, and I think you got a long road and a hard road to get to support. But you need to make the case, if you are supportive of this project, not only these other benefits, the economic development, that the risk is short-term, that, look, the high school has reached its end of its usable life. I mean, ultimately, that's sort of where we're at. But you have to make things very clear, and I hope that we're not still debating things like land sale or land or ground lease. The more information we can provide the voters is going to be absolutely essential if this is going to have a chance.
That's why I think we need to have a more extensive history of the George Mason site and a lot of things, and there are going to be all kinds of questions again about the Virginia Tech long-term lease and the status of that. So I think there's got to be a lot of information going out. It's going to be one of the biggest education situations we've got coming up.
Yeah, I mean, for those who are following it, I mean, the information's there. It's not like it's not available. It's not like this hasn't been happening for a while. But I don't know that everybody's as clued in as the group of people here. So there's going to be a big education push if this is, in my opinion, to pass.
Yeah, there's a lot of material that's got to be distilled down into a nice workflow chart. For the, just sort of follow up on one comment, there was talking about, some of the shared public benefits may not happen initially because of the price tag. The community school design doesn't preclude things by adding future pools, et cetera. And so part of modeling future projects is to allow and talk about the fact that there are some potentials in the out year, even if not in the near term. And Chair, if I may, the chair of the school board would welcome an opportunity to make a comment before you close.
Absolutely.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Listening to what you all are talking about, this is a huge undertaking that we have right now going before us. When you look at the cost that it is, it is very scary that what we're going to have. But I take it from the perspective of George Mason has reached its useful life. It is a facility that is, if not already, becoming more and more of an eyesore in our community, of a community that is very school-driven, that you hear 97% of people who move to Falls Church, they move here because they want their kids to go to our school. And I think long-term that if we don't do something with the school, yes, we should have probably done something 10 years ago. And I think we all recognize it, potentially even longer than that we should have done something. But if we don't do something now, we're talking the tax rate going up now. It is going to steadily go up because there are going to be people who knowingly move into Falls Church paying a higher tax than they would be paying in Fairfax or Arlington, but they move here because of the school system. If we don't provide a product, yes, we have great teachers, and I think that's the most important part of it, but facilities play an important role in that as well, where our neighbors have all begun either have brand new schools, renovated almost all of their schools. Fairfax is in I think the last part of doing their schools renovation, and we still have not really done anything. Like Ms. Hockenberry said, that we've done some just really band-aiding of the high school over decades, band-aiding of our elementary school, band-aiding of our primary school over at Mount Daniel. And when we discussed this on Tuesday night, the big thing that we're looking at, and why we still say to at least, I think, putting out there for the 120 million number, but there are opportunities for us to potentially come up with some savings, and we looked at different things that are out there for potential savings that will come down the road that we may not have to ultimately spend the whole $120 million. But, looking at our gym size, looking at reusing some of the furniture that is in that condition that can potentially go into a new building, looking at, which I don't think it's going to be a part of, but it was put out there by Perkins Eastman, and we discussed it as well, but geothermal. I would not support taking geothermal out of the new facility that's getting built.
Nor would I.
Yeah, so just, yes. So that was kind of talked about, but those are some of the things that we're looking at as potential ways that, depending on where we go, could go anywhere from $6 million to, I think, between $6 to $9 million that we could potentially look at some savings that Perkins Eastman has put in the initial education program that we can potentially reduce, because some of the facilities of the gym and some of the other things, the auditorium, are bigger than school systems that are bigger than us. So there is some reductions that can be done, and we're going to do our part in recognizing that this is a huge cost, and if where we can, we're not going to necessarily get a cheaper product, but we're going to have a product that is going to last us for at least 50 years, and we have to do that. And then, as we all just said, we almost move immediately from that to looking at other school facilities that haven't gotten the type of work and attention that we've kind of delayed over to them. It's going to be a big education program, I think, between not only the city, but also with us on the schools, of why this is an important project and why this is, if we don't do it now, I don't know if there's ever a time that we're going to be able to do this. But I want to thank you all for taking the time to look at this, and hopefully for your favorable support of moving forward on the 17th.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Don't run away. One comment is beware of cheaper product. I mean, that's something that we're notorious for. But the other thing is, okay, the learning cottages are gone. Are they going to be replaced up there? The ones in the front? What's the status? Because all of a sudden, my God, we got a front of a school.
I think we're going to definitely make use of the spaces that we have to give some outdoor, as well as the new kind of front area of the school. We're definitely going to take advantage of those things that are going to come with having this new space. And like I said, with the MEH part of it, we definitely some work has to be done there, but I think by connecting the schools, it gives that flexibility for us that we're building a school for $12.50, but it's not going to be $12.50 as soon as the doors open, so there will be that flexibility of space there.
But what I was really asking is that now that, are we going to have enough classroom space within George Mason as it is now without the trailers out front? Now that we've lost last year we lost the other ones, and just now I saw that everything is all gone.
I think we'll have to look at that and make sure that we have the space there, but
Yeah,
if
because there
need
isn't much
be,
space up there,
if
that's
need
for
be
sure.
for trailers to bring on, we'll have that flexibility to be able to do that if we need to do trailers. And again, we're also, the city as well as the schools are in talks with the UVA Virginia Tech folks, so who knows, we may have some type of agreement as we get there to do that. They've been very open to conversations, UVA, with the potential of moving their site over to the former ExxonMobil location, and so there is potential.
There's a lot of classroom space over
Yeah,
there
there.
that's
So
not
we are at
used.
least having conversations with them, which I think
That-
we've not done in a while, and we're talking with folks who are on campus who are making the decisions of what they potentially will be doing with their real estate here in the area. So that's at least a good starting point where we're at.
During the day, there's no reason why we can't have classes over there as a campus.
I agree.
mean, it's just, so I think that would be very, very welcomed compared to some of the classroom spaces that the kids are in now.
I would agree.
So let me ask, I just mentioned it, but does the school board have some plan in terms of outreach and how they plan on communicating the pluses and minuses? I mean, the one thing you just said here, I think is, it's been mentioned elsewhere, but is important to reiterate, is really how I think this is an investment in our property values and maintaining those property values and keeping people in the city and drawing new ones in addition to sort of reiterating the importance of education in our community, something that's been important to us for many, many, many years. And it's now time for the facility to sort of match that rhetoric. But does the school board have a plan for outreach, or that's still in process?
Still in process. Dr. Noonan is still, I would say, is getting fully up to speed of where we are. I think he's done a really good job of jumping on board and getting to a decent point right now. But I think in our meeting again on Tuesday, we did have that conversation of, I think some of the different groups at central office and some of the folks up at George Mason are going to start getting together this summer to begin that point of mapping out strategies of why this is important, but then also bringing us on board as board members, because we're going to be an important part of this opportunity and educating the community of why this needs to happen, so that we are all going to be on the same sheet of telling folks why this needs to happen. I agree with Ms. Hockenberry that that part about the different add-ons and not very attractive additions that they've done over the years needs to be a part of that conversation, and in that history of what's happened up at George Mason. But I think it's all incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we lay out, and then again, acknowledge the fact that it is a huge risk that we all are going to undertake. But I think it's one of those risks that I think we have to do this, because we've punted for a number of years now, where we could have potentially gotten something for the number that everyone was excited about for a while, of that 65, 75, potentially even $80 million. But in the market that we're in now, and construction companies are struggling to even find employees now, we are starting to get more and more expensive. And if we continue to punt even beyond this, we're going to get more and more expensive, more than the 120 that we're projecting right now. So I think if we want to do this, I think this is the time. And it seems like it's taken both bodies of council and the board to a number of years to get to a point that we are generally talking from the same sheet of music, which we in my first couple of years, that has not been the case, that we've gotten pretty far down the road, and then we all kind of splintered off when that number came out. And it was a number that didn't have any kind of support from outside folks, where this one with Perkins Eastman at least has us a little more comfortable that, okay, this is really going to be the number of what it's going to potentially cost us to put there. Yes, later on we'll get a little bit more detailed of what it's going to look like, but at least we've had some outside folks give us some more truth testing about what the cost is going to be.
Yeah, I think the city has, all the boards and commissions and the council and the city staff, everybody has come on board here and understood the urgency. There's a variety of reasons for that, but I agree, it's taken a long time to get to this point, but I do think that it's to be commended that we're striving for a November 4th date, 4th, November, I don't remember.
It is, I will tell you, it's you know, kind of coming together really quickly. I think I'd be a fool to not say that it seems like it's coming really fast, but I'm a little bit more comfortable that at least we are all talking, and like you said, I think we recognize, you know, there were folks on our side who were talking, well, whatever amount of land we need to do this, we'll do that. And I think we all kind of came to the realization that we need to at least set aside that 10 acres because it's to do our due diligence and our part of trying to make sure this project moves forward and finding a source to help with funding it. And that's setting aside that 10 acres for the commercial development.
Yeah, I think that those involved are really moving quickly. My concern is that the community is not at the same pace, is not moving at the same pace we are. And if we don't address that,
Very quickly.
all these plans will be for naught.
Yes, you're 100%. We have to, I think as soon as, if we are right after a vote of putting this to referendum, I think almost the next day has to start that complete education of the community of why this is important, not only for us at the schools, but community-wise. If it's almost a hand-in-hand type of project that affects both sides of it, both the schools with the facilities, but also the community with, I think, the overall home values in the community. So I think we have to do our part to make sure that we get that story out there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank
you all
you.
very much.
So Chair, as we wrap up this item, I think I heard consensus from the Planning Commission members that are here for the modified to be the ordinance that comes to you on the 17th in the prime motion. There'll still be other options for you, but
That's
I'll
what I heard.
formulate it that
That's what I heard as well. And I really like your patriotic outfit, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you for the time on the CIP, and be glad to work on the next work session item now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good evening, this is Akita Ruzi with Planning. The item up for discussion is the City Hall site plan, and I will briefly summarize the memo that's in your packet. So staff has reviewed the initial site plan and identified a number of issues that need to be addressed prior to the Planning Commission meeting on July 17th, which is provided in attachment 1 of that memo. Just to highlight the staff comments in the attachment, areas for improvement include pedestrian access and circulation, automobile access and parking, bike access and parking, connectivity to Cherry Hill Park, stormwater, site lighting, general site plan preparation requirements, and general fire safety requirements. Additionally, a TDM and a parking management plan are also requested by staff. And the project team is currently working on responses, and we understand that we will receive a revised site plan sometime next week. This is not part of your memo, but I will add that after some investigation, we found that there was a 1981 site plan for the City Hall. And and we think that this application could be processed as a site plan amendment rather than a full site plan for the entire City Hall campus. This means that, the project can address the staff comments within the limits of the proposed work and bring everything up to code within those limits. 2 items outside of the limits of disturbance would be brought into compliance with the 1981 approved site plan, and 3 future work items that should be addressed through other CIP or maintenance projects would be noted on the site plan amendment. In terms of schedule, the site plan is scheduled for final action by the Planning Commission on July 17th. There may not be enough time for staff to review the revised site plan before the staff report deadline, but hopefully we can work with the project team between now and July 17th date to get the site plan ready for approval. And that really wraps up my report of the staff memo, and I will defer to Cindy and her team for presentation of the site plan.
Presentation of the site plan. What are we seeing that, is this different than, we discussed this a couple weeks ago, our last meeting. So I just want to understand what we're doing, because I don't know that we need to see the site plan, but I would entertain comments from everybody else. But I do know, I looked at the materials provided. There was lots of questions from lots of boards and committees, pages and pages of questions. So they're good questions, and I think that's kind of what I want to hear more than the map, than the drawings. But if you have a presentation, I don't want to put that.
I think my presentation's more in line to what you're hoping to hear. What I would like to do is address some of the space and design and what we're getting for the 13 million, because that's one of the big questions, and then highlight the comments and our responses and have a dialogue around that versus repeating the site plan, which you've already seen. As Ms. Ruzzi noted, we are working to address a lot of the comments we've received from staff on the site plan, so that next week we can get a revised one back in and move this quickly back to the Planning Commission. Our ask is for a July 17th site plan approval. That is, as we've noted to the task force and to council, a faster pace project than we originally designed. We had planned a January construction. We are targeting October now in order to get the new rear construction undercover before winter, and then we can continue the phasing and the renovation. That prior to winter risk mitigation, we are estimating could save us $300,000 to $400,000 that then we can then put in project. So we appreciate this is a very fast timeline, and we are making our Development Review Committee staff, who also are housed in City Hall, and do their work to properly review this for you on a very expedited process. We appreciate that. So I would just like to walk through the crosswalk and then focus on some of the comments and our responses, and then entertain a good dialogue and discussion with the Planning Commission. I do want to recognize again that Mike Whitfield, Director of Public Works, is here. James Mack, who's our project manager, was out of town this week, so he regrets not being present. And we do have Studio 27 architect available for any specific questions that you might have.
Okay. Yeah, I feel confident I understand how the space was planned to be used as of 2 weeks ago. If that has changed as a result of the many comments, some of those from the Planning Commission at that time, then I'm happy to entertain those. And if you want to go through the rest of it quickly, because that's how you plan on doing it, that's fine, but I don't know that there's any questions. We went through it at some length last meeting.
So what I'll just do is highlight, you have hard copies of the comments we submitted to you at the dais so that you could look at the comments. We've put the responses back in red. And then I have provided you a large ledger sheet, because you know we love spreadsheets and big paper, so we can read them when we do CIP and things. So I'll just call that attention to you as a cross-reference. Council had requested a crosswalk so they could understand the difference between the 2014 plan, which is what we came out from Dewberry with, and then what Studio 27 had designed for 2016 and where we are now. I just want to reiterate for you and the public that where we are now, the 2017 site plan that's before you is achieving the goals and the size and the space and flexibility for the 20-30 years that we had planned to the 2014 design. We are not reducing the quality of what we are building, but we are not building the 2016 Studio 27 design that added a big front. So we had additional construction and 12,000 square feet. That in the ideal would have been great, but it wasn't within the budget when we costed it in current dollars, and it probably wasn't in the budget in FY16 to add that additional space. It met a whole lot of nice stuff. As you can see, it picked us up to 154 staff spaces, for example, and the central front entrance was bigger because it was a very big atrium and an extra walkway, but we are still achieving the goals without that square footage. So I did want to note that. We will still have the secured spaces. We're actually getting 2 elevators, which was some of the public comments when we had taken it down to 1. We are getting the parking we need, but no, we're not getting a whole lot of extra net. And I do have a draft TDM and parking management plan that we are working on that staff will have this week to review to help address that. So this is here. If anybody has any questions, I won't walk through it.
Yeah, so I have a quick question regarding the front part that was taken out of the project. That wasn't usable space anyway in terms of office space. It was just a lobby and an atrium, and so.
Yeah. So what we've done now is, because this becomes the atrium, the central lobby, half of it will be the central lobby, and then we're going to have meeting rooms and office space, and it becomes functional. It becomes the connection between east and west wing, and the G corridor that we have now stays as an east-west connection, so we pick up 2 cross connections. Before, we could have picked up a third at the upper level, but that was the only functional use of that. On this crosswalk sheet is some different options, because the task force asked for making the, what would it cost to make the rear new construction such that it could support parking in the future, additional offices. So we've done that calculation for you. That increases the cost to $16.8 million. So
Where's
it's
that?
you have it in 2 places. The simplest one
Okay.
is the right-hand column. I'll highlight it in the comment sheets in a minute as well. That is, 3.8
So what is the
million
increase in
over budget.
cost for that?
The- It's 3.8, 3.7 increase, and that's for your construction, changing from steel to concrete, redesign, and then a delay in construction while you redesign. That is not in the budget, nor, as you can see with the CIP discussion that we just had, is it feasible to afford an increase. There was also a request from council to do a mandatory safety concept if we only did public safety. So that calculation's there at 8.8. The difference basically is you weren't getting new HVAC, new plumbing, you weren't going to be LEED certified, you weren't fully sprinkling the building. So council at the end of their work session when we presented this said the 13 million is the design, and at their council meeting last week when we reviewed the CIP, they specifically said City Hall needs to proceed as is and address the public safety. The last thing on that chart that I would just like to call your attention to is the very bottom square. That's the mandatory system replacement. If we did nothing today, then you still have 3.6, almost $4 million of things you have to do because the HVAC is failing, et cetera. So, In the long run, staff's recommendation is still to proceed with the project, and that is one that you've talked a lot about during CIP and budgeting. The items before you then today is the site plan. So I would then, if the chair is okay, highlight some of our responses to the staff comments and not formally present anything on the CIP.
Yes, before you do that, I guess I didn't follow in the spreadsheet where you said the costs associated with future, preparing it for future development. I know we
Right.
talked about this on the parking garage. It's just,
Where is it? Right here?
I heard the numbers, I didn't see it on here, and
The
Ms.
task
Tease is-
force proposed column that kind of sticks out to the right. And the
So
only
where's
diff-
the portion of, I want to know the cost of building it so that we can add on to that parking
right here.
garage.
Yeah, so basically it's well, I can do it in two places. On this chart, and then I'll go to our comments. On the chart, if you look at the task force proposed total, it's 16.7.
Yep.
That's an increase from the 13.2.
I see.
The delta's it. And if you look at the bottom of the chart, the only thing that really changes the future one-story. That's in sort of the tan color at the bottom.
Sure, I see the future one-story in yellowish.
Yep. And it says yes under the task force proposal, and it says no on the other two.
Yes. So the differential, the 3.5 million is what you're saying is responsible for that expansion.
Then in the,
Even though there's many items that go up in law enforcement edition, is that the part we're talking about, law enforcement edition, that's how we're terming it? Is it the
Correct.
same thing as future one-story edition?
right, because you take the parking structure, which is the rear north addition, and go from, the square footage is the same, you just
Yeah,
added the
that's
second
that's actually what
level.
confused me, is the square footage is the same.
Right now, we're a steel construction, and we'd have to convert to concrete. You have to do ramping and different elevations, so you have increased site work.
Well, so what we talked about at the last meeting was different than that, actually. We discussed the ability to put offices above
Right,
that
right.
space as opposed to cars, appreciating that it's a small garage already and that ramping would take up an inordinate amount of square feet and that potentially concrete would be required for additional vehicles, but maybe not perhaps for offices. I still think that's an important part of this proposal, and perhaps we weren't clear about that at the last meeting. I did think we were, but it's possible that we were talking about additional cars because that was originally was proposed. But we just thought it was at the last meeting, and it may not be economically feasible, appreciating that, but we just thought it very short-sighted as a group. I mean, it was something we discussed at length, that we're building this structure. It is not what we had hoped to get in the near term, but to build it in such a fashion that doesn't allow for expansion in the future seems short-sighted, at least for as it relates to office space, because one of the other things that are being cut in this is the office space portion, some of the things that we had talked about in the original 2016 plan. So I think this is still something worth exploring before the next meeting, and not for vehicles. I'm less concerned about vehicles.
Right,
Well,
right.
This cost would build it so that you could do office or parking. It would give you the structural base. It's not including the costs, because it would be future setup. It's not including office square footage costs or even
Right.
parking finish piece.
It's just making the foundations stronger.
Yeah, so
That's essentially
basically,
what we're
you're
talking
going to
about.
need to get to 16.8, whether you're going for parking or office.
But what our understanding was when we heard the last one was that it would need to even be stronger to support parking. And so therefore, we kind of backed off from that. But we were very, very definite in our desire to have it, because, to have it available for future office space. Because one of my big questions was, you're going to have to build that one portion of the garage differently anyway, because you've got the courtroom sitting on top of it, and then why not do the rest of it? And so this cost even seems a little bit
So if I call your attention to page 8 of the memo that the project team supported to Ms. Ruzzi on July 3rd. It's dated for July 3rd. We gave it to her on Friday. Item number 35 on page 8. Part A talks about 3.7 million being needed for additional parking. If we just did the expansion of the second level that could support offices, you would need 3 million. That would provide 3,400 extra square feet.
What page was that again?
Page 8,
8.
item 35. Items B is the office addition. And that's in red font.
I see it. That differential surprises me, or the lack thereof of differential.
I'm looking in a different place again. Thank you.
I don't
The
know. I don't know what to
3 million
say
is-
about that. That seems like the spread is very minimal for.
I think it's because, and I'll defer if Mike or Jason want to add anything, I think the difference is you're going to concrete for the parking and you need the excavation, the footers, and the ramping for it to be parking. If you're going to do it for office, then you're building it sturdier for that, but most of this is adding the office square footage.
Right.
So instead of a parking, you're doing the office build out, and so you don't have much of a delta. Jason, we're recording, so if you can come up for the microphone.
3 million, I'm sorry, this 3 million is just for the build out itself. It's not for any additional capacity of the
Okay, great.
existing
So that makes more sense to me.
Now, wait a second. Would you repeat that?
So the additional monies that is noted on Part B is just for the build out of the office space itself. It's not any additional funding for beefing up the structure because the structure is already designed for an addition in the future.
Okay, I want to hear that last part again. The structure as designed, the garage structure itself as designed, is sturdy enough for a second floor addition.
Yes,
Office.
office, that's right.
Offices.
Yes.
See, that was not explained to us.
Yeah, great. That's great news.
And that's a big point, because that was our whole contention. We weren't talking, about the parking, because we understood that the garage is a lot smaller, so the ramps, it's ridiculous. But so as it is, it's going to be strong enough for an additional office space up there.
If $3 million was available to fund it. So this is
So it
the,
needs $3 million more to fund it.
Yeah, but I think we understood that where
Yeah.
we don't have the 3 million, but we wanted to, allow for the possibility that in future years, notwithstanding the last hour presentation, that we would have the ability to do it. And it sounds like we do now.
yes.
Can I follow up on that again?
So this response here was our project team's attempt to be responsive to your questions at the first work session.
So the part of the garage that's underneath the courthouse is structurally different than the rest of the garage.
No, it's all the same.
Then how
Same.
come,
That's
how come we need 3 more million to make,
You
we don't.
There's
We
no
don't.
more money.
we
There's no
don't.
more money needed.
We don't need
No.
3.5 million.
That was just if you wanted to
As
build it
it is,
out.
it's good. I just needed that clarified. Great, thank you so much. Makes me very happy,
Yep, so,
which is always good to hear.
yeah, so if you wanted it to be functional office space conditioned and so forth, then you'd need the 3
Okay.
million, but that could be added in the future.
All right, so you're going to guide us at the critical comments? Is
Yes,
how?
that was,
Okay,
so
all right.
one thing I would like to highlight on page 2, we have summarized some of the CIP and other projects that are surrounding this campus in order to look at it holistically while we're still doing a phased approach. This memo is written as a phased approach, but as you just heard, the proposal is for a site plan amendment, so we will accommodate that in our resubmission. But we do have a CIP master plan project that's happening at Cherry Hill Park. that will be replacing the equipment so that it's ADA accessible, but that also includes an improved pathway for handicap parking behind the farmhouse and over to the park. So we're going to ensure connectivity from this campus to the Cherry Hill Farmhouse. We do have an approved Park Avenue Great Street Transportation CIP project that's funded. We have an approved CIP Park Avenue Undergrounding project with a grant pending, but it is in the CIP. We do, as you all know, have the bike share grant, and as part of our TDM and the larger campus project, this is an area where one of the locations is planned for. And then as we work with the library project, if now in 2022, we would still be working with their plan, which is to reorient onto Park Avenue and make that a better connection to the park in here. So over time, we will address a lot of the comp plan, area plans, and the design guidelines for pedestrian and walkability. So that you'll see referenced in several of the comments, and so I thought I would just highlight it up front. Starting on page 3 with item number 1, pretty much all the way through 17, you will see that we have basically noted that the staff comments will be addressed and incorporated in our next submission of the site plan, so I wasn't going to highlight them, but I'll be glad to answer any questions. We will be submitting that on the 10th. For existing parking and bicycle parking and parking tabulations, we will be incorporating that to code compliance for the site plan amendment for the part around City Hall. We will submit and document that we are going to provide the required bike racks and covered bike racks per the newly adopted code.
Can I interrupt you for a second, Ms. Messner? You said you're going to submit the site plan on July 10th. One of the comments that's not in this long packet, but in some of the other attachments, was a review by the city staff, and in multiple places they said, I don't have it in front of me right now, but said, if this were a commercial developer, it would be incomplete and we would send it back.
Mr. Boyle's comment on page 8.
It's on this packet, okay. The site plan that we're submitting on July 10th, is that going to be meet a guideline, a standard we would have set for a commercial developer, or that's still under a modified city-only site plan?
This project team member's intent is for it to comply with the site plan regulations as we've called out here, and so the architect is working to answer those for elevations, parking, tabulations, etc. So we anticipate that we will be complying. Now, I will acknowledge that it is a very short turnaround time for staff to have it in the packet. And so, as the cover memo said, and I have mentioned to staff, if there are conditions for administrative verification by the planning director, we certainly are open to that and welcome that. If we delay the July 17th action to August, then we're just risking being able to have construction docs and permits done for an October construction. So we are trying to expedite at the front end in a very difficult timeline in order to not be undercover by winter. But we do intend to have a site plan that would be compliant.
Okay.
That would include things like the park and bicycle. And the TDM and the best practices. And I have the items that we're including in the TDM that I was working on. I haven't submitted to staff, but if you have any questions of things that we're looking to put into activity, I'm glad to go through with that tonight. I think I would like to jump to page 8, item 34. For the discussion on 2 entrances in front of City Hall. And that also came up during the AAB, and so we've responded to that in the rear of the memo under the AAB comments. But for ADA accessibility and LED, how about lead? We'll have two E's in this one. We need to maintain the two doors. The two doors also allow us to spread out the business of City Hall on court days, so people that are doing permits and other things aren't in the queue. And so that's why we've maintained the two doors. The contemporary look, and I can defer to the architect expertise, is designed so that it's more minimalistic as you look at the building, and you still see the Federalist look. We have two doors now, and the windows are balanced in the third, and so that's why the architect has proposed that look. This isn't the final design, but it is more of a contemporary entrance. So with that, I'll pause to see any comments or reactions.
Actually, we were talking the last time around about where the other window was, and it's in Steve Biddle's office over here. But seriously, if you were to change the doorway around, we would not have the continuity for the central hall here with the windows there, because it'd screw up all the windows. So anyway, design factor.
Well, look, I mean, my two comments is, one is, I'm pleased to see that we are, appears to be achieving LEED silver per the policy. And my issue with the contemporary design is not in the front, it's really in the back. So I assume we'll get there, but, in these comments, but the front I thought was a big improvement over what we currently have. The rear portion I thought was actually too contemporary, but I assume we're getting there.
We actually don't have any specific staff comments on that, although they want the elevations and the design to come back in so they can see it. So it didn't call out contemporary as much as how it interfaces into the building, so I'm glad to do that now to make sure we don't lose that.
Well, with the architect here, I would then like to just ask about the materials that are being proposed for the rear portion of the building. I was somewhat unclear about what those materials were.
For the garage portion, we have a CMU brick, and then over top of that is going to be a green screen metal panel system that will allow plants to grow over top of that CMU wall. And then there's also going to be a series of louvers to provide ventilation into the garage. And then on top of that, the courtroom is proposed to be a metal shingle.
Yeah, it's the metal shingle that I'm really questioning, really.
Okay.
So what is the... what's the color? I mean, it looked like it was a brownish color, or? I mean, over the years here, I have typically tried to shy away from giving architectural advice. I'm not an architect. It's just my own opinion that this is a large departure from what we have seen with what's the rest of the building, and we're creating something unique for the sake of creating something unique. Yeah, it's an odd looking design to me. Yeah, I mean, my strong preference is brick. This is the kind of thing that I get concerned about when we're rushing through the design. And maybe you will highlight this in all these comments, but what did the AAB say about this metal shingle?
At the AAB meeting, we actually had the physical samples of the product, and they were very complimentary of the design and shape and the materials, but they asked for more of a horizontal brick look than the triangle looks, and because we had several different precedents.
I remember that from
would
last
show.
week, or last meeting.
And so, but they liked the horizontal lines that fed into the brick of the building that exists now with the mortar lines. But they felt like it would be too hard to match the brick, and so it just looked like it was glued or plopped onto the back. That's not a very good architectural phrase, but it seemed to blend in. So the AAB seemed to be pleased with the materials that the architect had proposed.
Okay, I mean,
At
that doesn't,
meeting.
I've heard that explanation, so you're not the first person to say that to me. I just disagree. It's my personal opinion. I would prefer to see brick that doesn't match precisely, and we can, put a plaque up and say, this is the great edition of 2017, as opposed to seeing these metal shingles that, to me, don't fit the architecture of Falls Church. But this is an opinion question. If the AAB is supportive of it, I tend to let them weigh in on those issues, but my own personal opinion is I'm not a fan.
When I saw it, I thought maybe they were trying to blend it because it's on the park side to make it more natural looking, but I didn't think metal shingles really did that. I thought that's what the color was for. Are we still doing it? At one point, we were talking about doing a living wall on one side, maybe. Are we still thinking about that?
Yeah, on the lower level living wall.
Okay, but facing the community center or on all of it? So that would be, that brown would be partially, oh, I see, it's that part down there, right?
It's down here and around, and I think on the opposite side
But
there,
it just
too.
doesn't continue all the way down.
I think in this rendering it doesn't. Does the living wall extend all the way to the corner on the,
It's just on portions of the garage wall.
Right, 'cause I was gonna say, because portions don't, because the living wall would kind of, it wouldn't matter if it was brick really in a way.
right, I agree. I don't know, I'm not a fan, but that's, all right, we can move on.
The drawing isn't pretty anyway.
Oh, you want to see it?
But
You
really,
can
I
say
thought
all
when
you
I
want.
saw the color, I thought they were trying to make it.
Continuing for a moment on page 8, we briefly mentioned the lead. I will note that it is lead silver that we're doing. Current checklist and rough points has us around 63 to 65 points. 50 is minimum for lead, but we're early in the design, so it could go up or down. We did have a meeting last week with the commissioning firm that we've brought on board, and so we're starting the commissioning process with the contractor in Studio 27 now.
I think that's important, really important. In retrospect, I wish we had written the policy so that it was not required to be lead silver. It could have been an equivalent, because I've now come to understand the expense associated with this particular organization. But the fact that we're being energy efficient and requiring that of our other developers in the community, I think it's important that we're consistent on that.
It will be Energy Star, and it's very important for our long-term maintenance and operations, of course, but this is an area where it's good quality, and so although it's 13 million and it's the design of 2014, what we're doing with the HVAC and the plumbing and the lighting is current technology and plans. For item 37 that starts on page 8 and continues to page 9, there was questions about internal tenant placement and location and adjacencies. And the particular one that was discussed was with development services and the Commissioner of Revenue space. We have worked really hard to align the offices where they need to be for the most functional basis. So right now we do have Commissioner of Revenue and Finance aligned together because citizens often come and need both services. The development services and public works are aligned together because a lot of the citizen work as well as the staff work, there's logical alignment. Not everybody can be adjacent to each other, so we've had to make some prioritizations decisions. So we do have the Commissioner of Revenue on the west wing and Development Services and Public Works on the east wing. Basically, that group would take the whole first floor, and then Commissioner of Revenue, Treasurer, and HR on the other side. Everybody on where we are now, everybody comes in and goes either up or down a half a floor. So no citizen walks in and gets service except for probably the general registrar on the main level because they're a small office of 3. Commissioner of Revenue, the size of the offices don't allow moving the puzzles either. I think part of the biggest challenges with the issue that brings this up is the business license process with the permits process. That process can and should be improved today, can and will need to be approved during construction, and a lot of it could be done electronically, because whether the two counters are side by side or across a short city hall, we're not that big, we shouldn't be sending citizens back and forth between offices. I believe that can be improved process-wise, most likely electronically, and I've actually had some great conversations with Jim Snyder when he's on his travels and seeing other models and sending back best practices, and he's actually mentioned one where the business license can be done electronically and coordinated with the permits and not physically sending a citizen. So while there's different ways we could match people up, this is the most logical for the tenant use and the space and the number of staff that the Commissioner of Revenue's office has to Public Works and so forth. So that was the response that we provided there. I do think the wayfinding and the visual stuff will be so much easier because you're going to have open monument stairs. We're going to color code the floors so you'll be real easy to see where you need to go. And whether it's to vote or economic development or somebody with senior and disability or business permit to permit, we're going to try not to send people all over City Hall.
One question for you. There was a comment about widening one of the hallways. How did you treat that comment?
Widening one of the
Yeah,
hallways.
I think the AAB found the hallway to be too narrow at some point. I just remember from reading
I'm trying to remember which
earlier.
comment that was. I'm sorry. They start on page 20. Oh, that was out to that's page 24, item 6 of the AAB. That was a wider hall and outside staircase to the patio space, the terrace. And so the architect's currently looking into how to make that a better access, more visible to the public. And we do have a comment in here that describes that there will be public space outside of the courtroom and on the upper terrace for gatherings, and then the other part will be a green roof system that will drain into the stormwater, and that green roof is really important to our LEED certification.
Where's the
Sustainability.
green roof going to be again?
Pardon me?
Over the garage?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that
Is
needs to be.
that the question you're thinking
Yeah,
about?
that's the
Yeah.
question that I was looking at, yeah.
But I think whenever you have that in for public, you know, just for PR sake, you might put in parentheses for future expansion or something. Just PR having having a patio out there. Oh, all right. But anyway, just a public relations or selling job.
You know, if it wasn't a patio, then it would just be a blank space outside the windows.
Yeah,
It would still be there
I know.
physically.
I know. Yeah.
It's
I
going to exist
prefer not just to
regardless.
be a white membrane roof. I prefer to have some function. On page 9 for 38, there was questions about employee town hall meetings and so forth. So we've summarized the items for public input engagement that we've done at the request of council with this new design. And so that includes from all of our employee town halls and the employee advisory committee serving on the task force, as well as just letting you know what the other public meetings have been. And I'm going to step back for a moment because I didn't comment on item number 23 on page 6. And this one comes up in a couple places in staff comments, but there was a alternative design that was provided to the project team that had been done by city staff reviewing the applications. And in this plan, it was in the transmittal from staff in that first memo. It talked about closing the western entrance or the drive aisle that's by the west wing and allowing that to be more park space. And that, we won't preclude doing that, but we need to have the building designed and built and constructed so we can see the police movements, because right now that's their main means of egress during an emergency. And so that allows them to get out with less pedestrian traffic than you have over by the community center or the park. And so it might be that we can restrict it, but at this point, we need the construction to be done so we can test the viability of that, because in an emergency right now, community center or mailbox side of Little Falls is the way they would have to go out. If in the future there was a way to do a rear exit for egress police only onto Great Falls, then there wouldn't be a preclusion, but there's a lot of utilities and stuff between the communities that would take a whole lot more analysis. The security around the structure is really important, and the alternative design from the staff was targeting providing more open space and green space and security. I think there was not clarity on what the gate around the garage would be. It's a full secure door, not just an arm or a gate that could be driven through. So I wanted to make sure people understood that for where the police and sheriff and judge enter in and out of the garage, it's a full garage door, non-visible, so you can't see into what's happening when weapons are being exchanged from vehicles. The green space is really nice, but we lack the ability within this project for losing parking and regrading and doing that site work as part of the site. Doesn't necessarily mean it would preclude a future work, because we do intend to look at the rear parking garage and parking lot in the future to see how we can restripe it and or redesign it as a future project. That's a separate parcel and would not be part of the site plan amendment. That concept is kind of sprinkled in several of these comments. A lot of the transportation planning comments in terms of streetscape and pedestrian access would be ones not as part of the site plan amendment, but would be part of things that we do with those other CIP projects, either proposed or approved, that I mentioned earlier. So I won't go through them in particular, but I'm open for questions. On page 14, I've already mentioned that we will provide the secure bike parking and short-term bike parking. And here is the details for 8 Class 2 bike racks for the secure and 3 Class 3 bike racks for the short term. On page 15, for the TDM plan, I noted that I'm in draft, and I appreciate Paul providing a template that's been used for other developments. And so we're looking at parking management, where building off of the Foursquare TDM report that we received in 2005, for how we can designate parking, create enforcement, and also have a construction management plan. We are looking at doing a ride-sharing carpooling database among employees, because we can sort employees by their zip code and sort of where they live. Of course, bike share, would be looking at annual subscription of 2 to 4 that we can encourage employees to use bike share to go between our facilities so they don't have to get vehicles out on the road. So we'll be looking at that. WageWorks, which is one of our current employee benefit vendors, we can do transit reimbursement. They can do pre-tax dollars. We're starting that July 1. When we have more bike facilities like bike share and bike racks, we can actually get the threshold level minimum that we need to add that to biking and walking as a benefit. And then we'll be looking at funding in FY19 to refund. We have an adopted commuter policy where employees can get a certain amount of money per month when they reduce how often they drive to City Hall and they take other modes to get here. That was defunded in the economic downturn, and so as part of this, we would propose getting that back. And then a lot of the outreach, kiosks, brochures, things that are in our onboarding welcome packet. We do have in the City Hall design a redo of the police lockers and showers, which of course are available for them for showering. But also we have a shower and changing area for general employees built into this design, which will help with lead points as well. And the community center currently is and always is available. It's just sometimes hard with a lot of the activities that are there. During the day, it's available. So that's a highlight of where we are on the TDM plan and the PMP plan that's called out on 15. And then for the zoning and the public works things, we'll be correcting those with the submission in on the 10th. On page 17, item 7 is a description of the green roof with the drains and the downspouts. If you wanted to see a short description, more detail will be submitted. And I think with that, Chair, I've covered the key highlights from my interpretation in the comments, but I'd be glad to answer any questions or go through any specific ones.
Comments from, yep, Mr. Stevens.
Can't remember, did we include any EV charge stations in any of the parking? Or is it very difficult to add that at some point in the future, given the electrical system that's being planned and the capacity?
We don't currently have any EV stations planned. I defer to how hard it might be adding to the garage with the... Okay. Two are in the DD sets under development.
And then the ability to add them in the future, is that difficult? Might be good just to check on the electrical system and just kind of see what's involved. If there's something simple that could be added today that would make it easy to add this in the future, I think that would be worthwhile.
We can check on that, and as Mr. Stevens is aware, and I don't know if the full Planning Commission is, with the advocacy of Councilman Z and the work of Kate Walker, they've explored some solar panel options for like a canopy and a parking garage, a parking canopy area that would be in the rear of the parking. And that and the EVs seems doable at a cost of about $500,000. So what we're doing today doesn't preclude that. It would just need funding. With the change of the garage and the building, not the garage being closer up, there's actually more sun potential where it is now, and so the roof load should support if we had future opportunity to add some solar panels for like shade for pedestrians on the roof and solar on the top, but we don't have solar panels in the current project.
Yeah, I think the only option that we would really consider, in my opinion, on the solar parking canopy would be if we could do it in such a way that it doesn't cost anything extra. In fact, it should save money over time. So we're still exploring that.
I appreciate that.
Okay, a lot of these, question and answers, the answer was to be on the site plan that's coming up on the 17th.
We'd submitted on the 10th, it would be on your agenda for the 17th.
Okay, so we will have some, because that's an awful lot of new things or clarifications that are going to go on the site plan. So I'm just wondering, having the ability to actually look at it all, time-wise.
I appreciate the time constraints immensely.
Because
A lot of those will be submitted, I hope, are the technical things that are required that staff will be able to comment, but it is
next
going to be a
next site plan, next
tight
site plan.
turnaround for
Yeah.
staff as well.
So that's a little bit of an excellent segue into July 17th. This meeting agenda looks daunting. So when we get it on the next meeting on the 17th, because so many things are going to be included, do you have a sense of how much time we think will be required to review these additional items? I just look at what we got, and we got your CIP that we just heard about, and this as well, and then the railroad cottages, which I suspect will take some time. So just for my benefit, do you have a sense of how long you think these new additions on the City Hall site plan should take for you to review?
I might need to defer to Mr. Stoddard or the planners. I'm not familiar with your site plan review process. We are intending to submit it as clean as possible to make that easy. For the CIP part, based on your direction tonight, I can make that pretty short unless you want a discussion.
So I think it's laid out in the staff memo that the applicant is intending to provide the materials on the 10th, which is a Monday. Typically, package submittals for distribution are due Wednesday at noon. So there's about a 12 working hour turnaround from the time the materials come in to time package materials go out. So I think what's laid out in the staff memo is that a full DRC just isn't going to be possible. So I think what's going to be before the Planning Commission is the staff comments from the first submission, the applicant's response with the new plan sheets before you in your package, and then I think the applicant will be requesting an action that night on the 17th. I think this is where probably the conditions section of the approval is going to be very important, that obviously there isn't time for full DRC review, so it may be that the Planning Commission can identify those things that are most important, and the project shouldn't move forward without them. Those could be wrapped up in the form of conditions, and the site plan could be given a conditional approval.
Okay. That's fine. I think we need to, this is just an aside, I think I need to talk with staff in preparation for this meeting. This agenda looks like too much to me, so there's numerous items that seem to be requiring immediate action, the two we've heard about this evening, so those should certainly remain, but I'll make my own note that we need to discuss the 17th. I just don't see it all happening, I'll be honest. Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, I have a question about,
Actually, part of, my,
I have a question about the green roof. Do you have any technical details that we can look at? The green roof that's going on top of the garage? Can you describe the materials that are going up on top?
We do have a manufactured product that we are working with, but we don't have any details at the moment. We can include that with the next submission set. But basically, it's the roof system of the garage, and then you just have a waterproof layer, then growing membrane. So it's about a 6-inch deep section on top of the roof deck.
And do you know what the material that's going up on top of the slab will be? Is it a loose laid, or is it a fully adhered membrane that's going on top of the garage?
I am not sure of the technical details, but I can
Okay.
get that to you
All right.
for the next.
The reason why I'm asking is because there's been a lot of nightmares with green roofs, which leak immediately after they're installed. It'll be good to review those details before you try to make a decision on them. Usually the manufacturers will give you this really great song and dance about how well the green roofs work, but we might end up spending money in the future to remove them and replace them.
I have had that discussion with Todd Ray as our primary to make sure that, what we're building is low on the maintenance end and durable.
Yeah, and especially if it's going, is the slab, I'm assuming it's a concrete slab on top of the garage, right? The concrete on top. And because concrete cracks, that's where you get a lot of leakage into. So I think it would be great to look at the details, make sure that the details are well worked out.
Riding on that subject, just occurred to me that we are doing this for LEED certification to do the green roof, and probably with the, any future with the solar panel situation. Just wondering, we're doing that for that, but, the cost of it, and the cost savings, that we don't have any information on that as far as being part of the design.
We do have that costed out. I don't have that with me, but we could break out, unless you know the approximate scale. But
Okay. There's a lot of hanging, information here. So the 17th, I agree with you, is going to be a heck of a meeting.
Yeah. I mean, the irony here is we've taken forever to get this project off the ground, and now we're rushing it through. It seems sort of ironic is my word.
since we started this in 2007, I would concur with the irony.
Any other comments?
If I may, Chair, just a couple of things. I did have a conversation with Jim Snyder earlier today about the approval process, the idea of an amended site plan. That is something that's been done for other projects, other commercial projects around the city. That's the process that the Eden Center went through for the Good Fortune Grocery. It was also used up at the Coons Ford site when they wanted to do a number of small modifications to their building. So it has been used in the past as a way of accommodating a smaller change within a larger site that's already gone through a full site plan process. I think what that would mean for the commission at its July 17 meeting would be that the focus would really be on the area within the limits of disturbance and making sure that those areas are brought up to modern standards, specifications, code requirements. The areas outside the limits of disturbance, I think the focus would be on demonstrating how it would link up with some of those future projects. I think as Ms. Mester mentioned, there are a number of ongoing projects, whether it's Park Avenue Great Streets or Cherry Hill Park renovations. I think it's important to demonstrate in the plan sets, or at least mark in some way, how this site plan amendment would accommodate those future projects. You're trying to lay a pattern where all those projects are possible. So I think that would be the focus of the Commission's review, as well as making sure the details come in. Certainly materials, those are things that are required site plan elements. Those will be documented in the next submittal. One thing I did want to draw your attention to, and this was again after my conversation with Mr. Snyder, it's in the staff memo, that idea of that alternative layout that Ms. Mester has mentioned. The diagram is included in the staff memo. It's on page 12 of the memo. What is this from? This is attachment 1, I guess, is what it's labeled in the upper right-hand corner. But what it's showing is that drive aisle that runs currently between City Hall and the Cherry Hill Park. The idea of repurposing that drive aisle, that instead of a one-way drive aisle, it becomes a connection between the City Hall building and the Cherry Hill Park. And what would go along with that is a reorganization of some of the parking field immediately behind City Hall. The idea of bringing the parking field into right angles brings a lot of efficiency. Cars are things that like to be parked in right angles, and so the idea is to make that happen immediately outside the parking garage, and then turning some of those leftover spaces or residual spaces into programmed or functional green spaces. The idea long-term of seeing this as a green space, a municipal campus with green connections to all of the facilities, whether it's City Hall, the community center, Park, or the library.
Great. All right. I think that concludes us this issue for tonight. Obviously, we'll take it up on the 17th. So I think we're done. I do want to thank everybody for coming out, staff for sure, and certainly the commission on July 3rd. that's a big ask. I would have normally canceled this meeting, but we had items that seemed to be so pressing that couldn't have been postponed. So thank the commission and definitely staff for hanging in here tonight. So, all right, appreciate it, everybody. We will see you in 2 weeks. And have a happy July 4th.